Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Autodesk Virtual Academy brought to you by Kativ Technologies. I'm Nigel Lambayak, Application Engineer and Customer Success Manager. I'm also joined today by Nathan Eliason, who's one of our technical specialists here on the team. Nathan, how's it going?
It's going great. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks everybody for joining us today. I know, this is a hot topic. iLogic automation in general is something that, we definitely get a large crowd for. So definitely stay tuned. We'll show you some of the new 2019 iLogic capabilities with Nathan, so that you guys can start automating your products yourselves. So with that, if you have any questions, go ahead and type them into the GoToWebinar chat panel at any time. I'll make sure to address those at the dedicated Q&A portion at the end of this webcast. And I think we should be good to go. Let's go ahead and get started, Nathan.
All right. Thank you very much, Nigel. So as you mentioned, today we're going to go ahead and take a look at some of the new capabilities inside of Inventor 2019 as it relates to iLogic. I'm first going to just talk a little bit about what we're hoping you guys take away and learn from today's webinar. Then I'm going to give you just an overview of what the key capabilities are, especially that we're going to be covering today. Then we'll follow that up with a demonstration, and then we'll have a live Q&A at the end. So as I mentioned, really what I want to do is introduce some new iLogic capabilities. Actually, with the Inventor 2019 release, they came out with some new functionality that really makes it a lot easier and more efficient if you want to use code to actually insert parts into your assembly. And even if you're not an expert coder, it's actually really easy to capture what current constraints are that you have set up inside of your assembly. And then you can use those same constraints and you can bring in whatever number of parts that you want. So we're going to take a look at how we can do that. Now, specifically with the learning objectives that we want to go through today, they have added some capabilities where you can actually name geometry. So faces, edges, and vertices, you can actually name them now, which makes it a whole lot easier when you're writing code so that you know how to mate or assemble two parts together. They also have some new snippets or easy commands that make it simple to add or delete components from your model. And we're going to see how we can do that in our demonstration. And then they also have some snippets around constraints. So you can add mates, you can add flush constraints, you can do all of that through code. Now, the demonstration that we're going to do that in context of this industrial skid-mounted blower that you see on the screen. And specifically what we're going to do is we're going to be looking at this top part right here. This outlet for the exhaust blower, we're going to give the user multiple options of different kind of connectors that they can use there. In fact, for our example here, we're going to have 8 different outlets that they can choose between. Now, they can choose any one of these 8 configurations based on 3 choices. Their choices are that they can either have an outlet that is circular, so you can see all of our circular are over here, or rectangular, which are over on this side. They can also have outlets that are flange, which you can see here, 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 and here, or they can have a clamp-based ending, which you can see here, 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 or here. Or their last option is they can have it elbow, or they can have it straight. So basically, we're going to give the user 3 different options, and based on which combination of those 3 options that they pick, we're going to go out and pick up the right part and load that right here so that they have the right outlet in their specific blower. So we're going to do that with a few tools that are new to Inventor 2019. As I mentioned, the first thing that is new, which this is actually really cool, it makes it very easy in code to reference faces instead of having to maybe create some work planes or some other workarounds to get this to work. So really just by right-clicking any face, edge, or vertex inside of Inventor now, you have this new option called Assign Name. And when you click on that, a little dialog box will come up and it will let you name this face or edge or vertex, anything that you want. And I'm actually going to show how that works. Now, in conjunction with this new functionality of being able to name these types of geometry, inside of the iLogic browser, they now have a new geometry tab as well. And this geometry tab, when you go in here and you start naming a lot of different faces or edges, this shows all of the different edges or faces or vertices that you've renamed. And you can see that this little glyph shows that this is a face. These are edges right here, and that is a vertex. So the glyphs show it, make it really nice and easy to tell what exactly you've named. Now, the second thing we're going to look at, as I mentioned, is adding and deleting components. So they have a whole bunch of new commands that let us add and delete components as necessary. Obviously, we want to be able to add components. We can also add iParts. We can add content center parts. Through code, we can actually add a circular pattern, rectangular pattern, or feature-based patterns. We can delete components. We can delete patterns. And we can even get the appearance. So, if we have a specific component set at some type of appearance, we can go ahead and get that, and we can set those appearances as well. Now, we're also going to look at the constraints. And there's some new code that lets you go in and we can add imates, angle, flush, insert, symmetry, tangent, all kinds of different mates or constraints that you would create manually. And we can also delete constraints. Now, they also made it very easy. So if you have two parts in your assembly that are currently constrained together, you can actually right-click on that part inside of the iLogic inside of your iLogic interface, and they have this option to capture the current constraints. And when you do that, it's actually going to come up with those commands for you automatically. In fact, we're going to use that in today's demonstration so that you can see just how easy it is to set everything up you want, grab the code from it, and then start making the changes so that you can swap parts in or out as you want to do in your application. So with no further ado, let's go over to Inventor now. And here you can see we have the assembly, and I have not yet attached the outlet that we're going to use for today's presentation. And I want to point out, we already have some iLogic rules that are written here. In fact, if I come to my form right here, notice that I can change the height of my outlet right here. It will change that casing. I can also change the width of my assembly here. And I can even, if I come over here to my color options, I have the ability to change the color and the look and the feel of my part with what I have set up so far. But now what we want to do is we want to go ahead, we want to add the outlet that we're going to be working on today, and we want to go ahead and automate that. Now, first things first, I want to go ahead and open up the part that I'm going to show you how we can create names for. And give me a second here. I don't know what that is up there. That's hiding my open button. But we come right here, and I want to point out that we have all of these different parts that represent the different parts I'm going to be opening. And in fact, if I look right here, this right here is the folder where I have all of these different end connections. And if I go down here, you can see my little update inside of Windows Explorer showing up. It's changing as I'm going through these. And notice how I'm very consistent with my naming convention. On the left, it's either straight or elbow. In the middle, it's either rectangular or circular. And on the end, it's either a flange or a clamp type of a connection. And this is very important because we're going to use this to make it very easy to swap components in and out. And you're going to see that here in just a couple of minutes. So let's go ahead and start with our elbow circular flange. I'm going to open that up inside of Inventor. And when I open this, I have a couple of work planes that we're going to use to place this inside of the blower. In fact, if we look right here, if I come to my model and we go to the casing, give me just a second here. Notice that we have two planes to locate it that direction and that direction. But then we want to make this face right here with this bottom face right here. So notice I don't have a work plane there. So if I were writing code, how would I reference this? Well, now with 2019, I can just right click this. And notice that we have this new assign name option in our context menu that you can open. And I'm just going to go ahead and call this our exhaust mounting face. So now you get a nice little arrow that shows that we've named that face and it points to it. And as I mentioned in our iLogic browser, we now have this new tab called our geometry tab. This will show, if I go through and I name another edge or something else, all of the names I give to entities will show up right here on this list. I can also right click and hide it so that you don't see it as well. So now that I've named that edge, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to save this. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to insert it into our assembly. So we come down here and we have our elbow circular flange. And I'm going to just use the standard inventor constraints to place it. And we're placing it for a reason, because I want to show how you can do this trick without knowing code, to simply go in and create the codes, to create the constraints with code that you need in order to make this work. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and select the plane. We're going to go ahead and start aligning this as we need to. And click apply. And then we just have one more quick constraint that we need to create. I'll do that pretty quick here. All right. And so now you can see we have this fully constrained. And in fact, if we want this to look a little bit better, I even have the bolts that we can go ahead and we can unhide here. And so now you can see our part placed where we want it. So the next thing we want to do is we want to start writing code that lets us swap this in and out with any of those other connectors. But first, we need to build in a mechanism where the user can actually pick what options that they want. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a few parameters. The first one we're going to create is going to be our exhaust blower config parameter. And this is going to be important because this is going to tell us what the current connector is that's open inside of our assembly. So I'm going to go ahead and set that the default as elbow circular flange. Now notice that what I typed in right here, it exactly matches what we have inside of our model tree and our model browser. And that's very important that those two match. I'm going to go ahead now and add some additional ones. We're first going to have exhaust fitting type. And remember that when we're creating parameters in Inventor, you can't have spaces, which is why I have all of the underscores. The fitting types that we can choose between are elbow or straight. So we're going to make that a multi-value list that they can choose between. Then we're going to create another one. This is going to be for our exhaust fitting shape. And this is going to have the options of being either circular or rectangular. And then we're going to create one more, which is our exhaust. I'm just going to call it connect type. And this one, we're going to have the options of making it either flange or clamp. Now, you can see here we have elbow circular flange. So I'm going to switch that to flange. And notice that now all of these options match here. Now, if I make changes to these right now, nothing's going to happen because I don't have any code that helps them know how they are supposed to change the model. So now we're going to go to iLogic and we're going to create a rule. And the rule that we're going to create, we'll just call this our exhaust output connector. And when I bring up the iLogic interface, I want to point out that we have some new snippets that are available. So if we come up here to assemblies and components, notice that here we can add components, iParts, content center parts, patterns. We can delete components and parts. And we also have this other relationships where we can add different types of constraints. So we have angle, flush, insert, mate, symmetry, tangent, a lot of different types of mates that we can add. And we can also delete specific constraints if you want to as well. So if for some reason you want to delete one constraint and add a different constraint based on someone's options, those options are available, and it's very easy to do now with Inventor 2019. So if I come down to my elbow circular flange here, I can right click this and I have a couple options. I can just capture the state to add it. What that does is that basically just is the code that would insert it. Just like if I picked the place command inside of Inventor and picked that part and it just randomly put it in space, that's basically what that would do. But I also have the option to say also grab the constraints. And when I do that, notice that it grabs not only the part, but it knows that we added 2 mates and a flush constraint. So it knows that we added all of these constraints. So let's see what happens now when I save this. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to, let's go back to our model browser so we can see what's happening here. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this out. So I just now deleted that fitting that we had just put in. And when I go to iLogic and I right click and say run this rule, notice that that code brought it back into my session and it created those same constraints again to put it right where I needed it to be. So pretty cool. Without really knowing any code, I was able to just come in, grab how that's placed, and then have the code right there for me ready to change as we need to change it. So now let's go back and edit our rule again. And I mean, that's pretty cool that we can do that, but just putting that same part in the same location probably isn't much value unless we can go through and start making changes to it. So we're going to start adding some code here that will allow us to do just that. I'm going to pull up our user parameters so that we can see these new parameters that I had just created. And we're going to first create 2 variables. One is going to store the CAD file name, and these are both just strings. And one is going to hold the component name. And I'll explain what those are in just a second. Okay, so the CAD file name, if you notice right here, if you look at this first line of code, this adds a component to our current assembly. And right here, this is the actual component name as it shows up in the model browser inside of Inventor. And this right here is the actual IPT. So this tells it what file to go out and find on disk and load into our current assembly session. So because these are going to change based on what someone chooses, what the user chooses, I need a variable that allows me to change these based on someone's selection. So what we're going to do is we're going to do 2 things. First, notice that this exhaust blower config, this shows what our file name should be. So you can see elbow circular flange matches this elbow circular flange. So when someone makes a change to any of these fitting type, shape, or the connector type, we want our exhaust blower config parameter to update so it matches whatever selections that they have made. So that's the first thing we need to do. So right here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to double click this and it will bring it into my session. And we're going to say that equals our exhaust fitting type, which is elbow. And then in Visual Basic, if you just type an ampersand and then in quotes, that's basically going to now put a space after that elbow. This is basically how you concatenate different pieces of information so it puts it together in a string. So then we're going to add the exhaust fitting shape, which would be our circular in this case. And then we're going to add another space after that. And then we're going to add what our connector type is. So this code right here, after we make a change here, it will run and it will update this to be whatever the new selection is that they've made. Now, based on that, we want to go ahead and make the CAD file name whatever the exhaust blower config value is, but we'll also need to add the .ipt extension because that's an actual CAD file. It's an actual Inventor part it's going to go out and find, and we're going to need to load that into session. Then we're going to create another one, which is component name, and that's going to equal our blower config, but in this case, we're going to add a :1. And if you notice right here, you can see that it basically gives our component name plus a :1 That's how the components show up inside of the model browser inside of Inventor.
Yeah, it's like the first instance of the elbow circular flange.
Yeah, we're always only going to have one instance. So we can go ahead and we can keep that one. So now I can go in, now that I have these variables set up, I can change this to be my str component name. And I can substitute this to be my str CAD file name. Now, as we go down through our constraints that are created, notice that this is creating a mate constraint. And if you notice, this is elbow circular flange 1. Guess what? That's our component name. So again, I'm going to highlight this, and we're going to sub in our component name, because as it changes to other fittings, we want that to be able to update. Notice that it's grabbing that face that we renamed. We renamed that exhaust mounting face. And then it's going to hook it up to that other face that we have on the top of our casing. So then we go to the next one. We have a similar thing where we have this work plane right here that's being mated up against our elbow circular flange. So again, I'm going to change that to my str component name. And then we're finally going to do that here at the bottom. I'm going to substitute that to say str component name. So you can see fairly simple changes that we came in and made. A lot of the code was written for us. We just had to create a few variables and set them equal to different types of information that we needed. So now I'm going to click save, and we're going to see what happens. So I'm going to open up my parameters box, and we'll go ahead and we'll change it from an elbow to a straight configuration. Now notice, awesome, it created a straight configuration, but we have a problem. And the problem is that we didn't tell it to delete the old one. We just told it to add a new one. And so if we kept running it, we'd have all these different components that would start stacking up on top of each other. So how do we handle that? Well, I'm going to go ahead and delete the one that we don't need, because that was the old one. And we're going to go back to our code. And right here, before we make any changes here, notice right now, this exhaust blower config, this is set to the existing one that we have. So if I delete this before I change it, then it's actually going to delete whatever my current component is. So I can go in here and I can say we want to delete this part. And the part that we want to delete is this. And then remember that we have to add the first instance. So now I told it delete straight circular flange instance 1. That's basically what I'm telling it to delete now. So now let's save this. And now you can see it actually just ran it. So it deleted it and reinserted it. But now no matter what I come and change, notice that it's going to delete the existing one and it's going to put the new one in. And so you can see how with just a very small amount of code, we were able to go in and make this completely configurable based on the types that you want. So now, of course, if we wanted to, we could come in here and we could add this information to our form. So you can see I have my form right here. So if we wanted to, we could add another tab. Oops, I put that the wrong place. Give me just a second here. All right, we'll just put it right there. We can go in here and we can say that this is our output sizing options. And then we could go ahead and add these 3 options right here. And now just like that, when I open up the form, right from our form, we can go ahead and we can start controlling this. And notice that as we change the heights or anything else, it changes. Now, you will notice we have one issue. If I go in and I change the color, we haven't told it to change the color on this one yet. So if I wanted to go ahead and finish this so that it would change the color, I could go to my color rule, edit it, and right here, this is the code that actually changes the appearance of all of the parts inside of my assembly. So I have this one that I had commented out. And again, I would do the same thing. I would come in, set that equal to my exhaust blower config variable, and then do my my and1 there. Have to hit the shift key there. And now when I do that, notice that now as I make changes in my form, everything updates regardless of whether I'm changing colors, I'm changing sizes, all of my automation works exactly the way I want. And again, we were able to do that with fairly small amount of code. And that's because of the enhancements that they made in Inventor 2019. I no longer have to really go through the API route if I want to use code to control inserting and placing components inside of my assemblies. So that wraps up the presentation that we had for, oh, I'm sorry, I did actually want to show one more thing real quick. For any of you that use Configurator 360, I did load this, and it also works in Configurator 360 as well. So we can go here to collaborate and say upload to Configurator 360 here.
And before we do this, or while we're running through the options here, Nathan, can you give everyone who doesn't know what Configurator 360 is the 30-second tour, I guess, or explanation of what that is?
Sure, I'll even give a shorter version than that.
There you go.
So Configurator 360 is basically a web-based user interface that Autodesk has made. It's a separate subscription outside of the product and design and manufacturing collection. But what it does is it basically allows you to send a URL to a customer, and then your customers can click that URL, and it gives them a web interface where they don't need Inventor, they don't need any of that type of software. Just through a web browser, they can go in and make all of those changes themselves. And in fact, as soon as this loads here, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. So notice that right now I'm just inside of my Chrome browser. Nothing special here. And you can also customize this with your company logo, anything else that you want to kind of personalize and brand it to your own company. But what we can essentially do is we can come in here and notice that all of the information I had on my form is also available here. So if I wanted to change this back to a nice, whoops, I wanted gold. So if I wanted to change the color to gold, I have all of my color change options there. I have all of my drawings here, or my pictures that I embedded into my form. And I can also come in here and I can make changes right inside of my application here. So notice that even though I'm using code to take parts out and add new parts in, all of this works with Configurator 360, which gives you a really powerful way to deploy your solution once you get everything set up the way that you want and have your customers directly use it themselves. All right. So with that said, I appreciate all of you joining today and going through this presentation with me.
So yeah, again, if you want to see more iLogic stuff, definitely make it known. There is a survey after the webinar. If you want to see a particular topic, you're looking for something in particular, you want to learn more about something, definitely make it known, and we'll make sure that we try to address all of the requests. So again, thank you all for being here. Nathan, thanks again, and we'll see you guys next week, same time, same place, Thursdays at 10 a.m. Pacific. All right, thanks everybody. See you
Thanks
later.
everyone.